We've got approximately 90 to 100 victims. I think we're just scratching the surface.
It's quite horrendous, really, what she's actually coming out with, just being raped constantly for between 10 and 13 hours.
Then he pushed me onto the bed and lay next to me. I just stopped saying anything at that point. I just lay there.
I didn't rape her.
What did you do with her then?
I didn't rape.
What did you do with her?
Yeah, I didn't do nothing with her. Yeah, I don't even know her, yeah.
It's so easy to manipulate the mind of a child, and that's what they are, they're children.
We've got to prove our case beyond reasonable doubt. The defence only have to provide a doubt.
Last week, a major trial in the Old Bailey ended with the conviction of a gang of men for grooming and sexually exploiting girls as young as 11 in Oxford. This is just the latest of a series of sex gangs cases that have come to court. But 3 years ago, before any of these cases came to light, police in Telford allowed cameras to follow one of the biggest child sex trafficking investigations the UK has ever seen.
Loads more people.
This unprecedented access shows from the inside the challenges of bringing Britain's sex gangs to justice.
Is she happy with the security we've got around her at the moment?
Telford police have been running Operation Chalice for almost a year. A team of specially trained officers are working round the clock trying to gain the trust of vulnerable girls who were as young as 11 when they were first abused.
She's been taken to Birmingham at 14. He would rape them all first to test the waters, to see who was good, to then take the best ones to Birmingham. They'd always buy them bottles of Bacardi, get them to neck it so they were that drunk. I go and then sit next to her, and with that, she completely breaks down. She's absolutely sobbing, completely hysterical, to the point where I start crying as well, because it was just horrible. She then just starts going on and on about the time she's been raped, and quite violently as well, and she goes into detail. She remembers being given alcohol and then passing out. She then wakes up on a bed where she's the wrong end of the bed and the head's sort of falling off the end, and she's been raped by 2 of them, but she feels like she's been drugged because she cannot move her body to get them off. But while she's being raped, there's another room that's locked with a number of girls inside and a number of men, and she can hear the girls screaming and crying that are quite clearly being raped in that room.
DCI Alan Edwards is leading the investigation.
The intelligence is absolutely compelling that something's going on. One girl in particular is talking about these 2 men, Max and Eddie, picking her up, taking her away, taking her around to see different men. What I wanted to ensure was that I could concentrate on them, see what they were up to, see who they were associating with, and from there find out how many other victims I might have.
Can you talk me through the profile of the offenders?
The offenders in the main that we're going for were the facilitators, and the facilitators were actually young Pakistani men. And the difficulty is, how do you deal with that? And how do you deal with it without being accused of being racist in some way? My view is this: I've got a bunch of criminals. I don't care what background they come from. I don't care anything else about them other than they're gang raping young girls. And I'm going to arrest them.
Much of the intelligence at the beginning of the investigation came from David, a concerned father who had started to follow his daughter Abby after her behaviour became increasingly alarming.
Every time my daughter went missing, if I'd seen her getting into a car, I'd report her missing straight away. You would look at vehicle registrations, the colour, the make, any identifying marks on the vehicle, the occupants. But then you start thinking about the routine and what she's actually doing. She was sleeping all day. She was getting numerous texts and harassing phone calls, to the point where she would go, I'll be there, showering at 10:30 at night. Wait until you've gone to bed. You hear the door shutting.
The turning point for this family came in April 2008, when Abby went missing for 3 days.
We didn't know where she was. We rang the police because she didn't come back that night. God. She was taken to a house. She was fed alcohol and drugs. She was in a room. 4 or 5 men went in. Don't think I have to elaborate on that. A friend was in another room. She said she was locked in the house. When she did come back, she was subdued. She was secretive. She didn't want to speak to anyone. She hid herself in her room. She ate in her room. She had bites all over her neck and bruising on her arms. She come back in a really bad way. I went to the police station and I said my daughter's been raped. The police doctor was called. We took her to the hospital, but she wouldn't have any examination. She didn't want it, so we couldn't force her to do that. It was so hard. That's basically when my life changed, when her life changed.
These parents lost count of how many times they reported their daughter missing. They believe it was around 60 or 70 times. But with victims too scared to make a formal complaint, it took 18 months for the police to act.
How many do you reckon we're going to need?
I would suggest somewhere in the region of 30-40 officers.
Yeah, I'll see what we've got in here, and I'll have a quick word into task force, see if there's any other people on the organised crime side that they can come in and help us.
I'll take it it's going to be a 7 o'clock start on Thursday.
I think it'd be earlier than that.
Earlier than that? I'll set me alarm then.
I'll have to.
In December 2009, with intelligence mounting up but very little hard evidence, DCI Edwards decided to make a bold move. A series of raids begin in which a total of 9 suspects are arrested in the market town of Wellington, just outside Telford. Some are locations where the police believe girls are being taken to be raped.
You're under arrest on suspicion of trafficking within the UK for sexual exploitation.
This is the room secured with a key lock and security chain.
Please.
Amongst items seized by police is a condom used inside and out with the DNA of multiple men. Once the men are safely in custody, 9 girls are invited to give evidence.
Is this the person that you were referring to when you made that identification?
Yeah.
Can you please tell me the number which appeared on the screen when that image was displayed?
Number 5.
With their abusers locked up for now, the girls are willing to give enough information for the police to interrogate the suspects.
I want you lot to tell me why I got arrested and that. You were arrested, just to remind you, on the suspicion of rape. These are the names of some girls. There was a few girls, yeah, texting me like, yeah. I wouldn't do nothing with no girls at all. I've got a wife here at home, you know what I mean? I've got a kid on the way and that.
You've texted that person, were you going to suck my sweet chocolate cock? What's that about?
No comment.
You then go on, are you slim, min, overweight? So you don't even know what this person looks like that you're texting, that you want them to suck your sweet chocolate cock.
Within 3 days, the police have enough evidence to charge Max and Eddie and 3 other men. But for the victims of the Chalice investigation, their ordeal is far from over. The men are soon released on bail and start to threaten the witnesses as they had done previously.
At 14, she was told by a man, I know where your mum lives, your brother will get it, your mum will get it. And these girls believe, that they're young girls, they believe these threats.
I decided that I wasn't going to be there past Christmas because I was going to kill myself or they were going to kill me.
Just over a year into one of the country's biggest child sexual exploitation investigations, 13 men have now been charged with crimes ranging from rape to sexual activity with a child. The total number of victims has risen to over 100. Some were as young as 11 when they were abused. The team building the police case has grown to over 50 officers, and Detective Chief Inspector Neil Jameson has just taken over as a senior investigating officer.
Can you just give us a quick update?
Yeah, I mean, it's taken us between 8 to 10 weeks to get her comfortable to interview. She's making disclosures going from basically being forced to give oral sex through to gang rapes, accused of blokes while she's been pinned down, having sex with her, held hostage for between 10 and 13 hours, just being raped constantly. It's quite horrendous, really, what she's actually coming out with. She went away the first night and sat and wrote a list of males that she needs to speak about who are offenders. She actually came up with 101 names. And we know for a fact of what she's already told us in the 8 to 10 weeks beforehand, she's actually missed a lot of names off anyway. So you're talking a lot of offenders.
You know, that's obviously added to the vast amount of people we're already looking at, so yeah.
It's at least 150.
That's right, yeah.
Listening to Ian, probably nearer 200.
Right, now there's a few others.
Same kind of thing again, gang rapes. She'll talk about the urine throwing episodes.
Yeah. It seems every day something's coming out and something more traumatic and, you know, sensational. But we've got to just get on and deal with it. I don't want to lose focus. So thank you very much, and that's it.
The scale and horrific details of the case are way beyond what most of the investigating officers have seen before.
We're having to give the officers counselling because of what they're having to go through. Because when we talk about girls breaking down and talking about their experiences, it's actually quite harrowing when you realise this 14-year-old girl who's talking about being gang raped and these men swarming her and using every orifice she's got all at the same time, and she's 14 years of age. And you've got your officers trying to deal with that. And then say to them, yep, keep working late tonight and come in tomorrow.
For a lot of us in here, when we go out and we see these girls, you can't help but feel some kind of emotional tie to them, because you're watching somebody, one, going to pieces on you, and secondly, disclosing the most horrific of crimes. For example, like Danielle's girl today has phoned up. She's then further disclosed a further rape. So we're in this constant sort of wheel all the time. That's the bit that's really draining. Emotionally draining, mentally draining. That's the bit that we actually struggle to deal with a lot of the time. Every day there is generally a crisis in the office where something happens with one of the girls. We have to keep saying the same things all the time to them, because they'll get it and then something will happen and I'll be straight back to where they were, so we've got to start again. Just getting them to realise they have been a victim and it's not their fault, and that there's hundreds of other girls involved.
The police are identifying a classic pattern of grooming, starting with friendship but moving quickly to abuse and control. Sarah's ordeal started in Telford just a month after meeting a man who was introduced to her by a friend.
He just intimidated me. I couldn't get away because I knew that he was stronger than me, and I told him not to take my trousers down, but he didn't listen. And I tried to get him to promise not to take off my underwear. Then he pushed me onto the bed, and then he got on top of me. And then he promised that he wouldn't put it inside, and he was just going to put it on the outside. But then I just stopped saying anything at that point. I just lay there.
Did you realise what was happening then?
Yeah, I knew what was happening. I didn't know what to do about it.
And he raped you. Why didn't you report it to the police?
I did. I reported it. I reported the first rape, but I was really scared, and I didn't. I told the police that I didn't want him to be arrested because he only lives down the road from me.
And how long before you were introduced to other men?
It was 2 days later that that his cousin came round, and then it was a week later. The next time, that's when his brother came round, and Roy's uncle. I didn't know what was going on in my head. I felt like my mind had shattered like a glass, and all my emotions were floating around all over the place. I decided that I wasn't going to be there past Christmas, and that was either because I was going to die, because I was going to kill myself, or they were going to kill me. That was in August, so I'd got August until December to kill myself.
So you'd planned, that was your way out? I'm sorry.
It's all right.
DS Sophie Wade is collating the evidence from different victims and has started to see a common pattern emerge.
3 men in particular, the Ali brothers, Max and Eddie and Mohammed Ali Sultan, were local men well known within the community, and a lot of young women, youths, knew these men. They were enthralled by the older man who had the car, who gave them cannabis, who gave them vodka, and they thoroughly enjoyed the kudos of driving around in a car with Ali Sultan around Wellington. Everybody's looking at me. He's the man who's giving me the attention. And they felt very, very special. And these men made them feel really wanted and quite genuinely loved in their eyes. And how could they be bad people? How could they do anything to actually harm them?
The men then introduce the girls to their friends and family and take them out to secluded areas at night.
They will take them out there, they will ask them to perform a sexual act on themselves or somebody else, and it's usually accompanied with, you know, if you love me, you do this for me. The girl will say no, and they're either told to get out the car, so they face the threat of either being thrown out in an isolated area, which is, I think for a young girl, is a really frightening place to be, or would it be just easier to actually give somebody oral sex? And that's what they've done, and a lot of them have actually chosen to do that because it is just the easier option in their minds. And that continues in that vein for quite some time, and that's how the behaviour becomes completely normalised. They become completely desensitised, but they become entirely compliant with what is being asked of them.
As the months progress, the team are only too aware of the hurdles they face in proving this case in court.
The problem we're going to have is that they're going to try and discredit the girls because of their vulnerability and because of the fact that they are having sex with so many different males, and they're going to say that, you know, they're promiscuous and that they bring it on themselves and stuff. Well, it's not their fault. We're talking about men now. You're not talking about teenage boys. You're talking about men who are grooming young girls as young as 12 right the way up to sort of 13, 14, 15 who are still children.
The thing that's really let us down is the forensic side, really, because we were hoping to get more evidence of the girls and blokes being together in the same place, but there's that much mixed together. It's just a complete soup, and they can't decipher whose DNA is on the in a particular place.
You put a glow lamp over the vehicles and it highlights whether there's DNA. Say, for example, on the seats of the vehicle, some of the vehicles, it's just glowing bright because there's so much DNA in the vehicles themselves, and it's very difficult to separate them out.
Even though the interior of the perpetrator's cars glows bright with semen and vaginal fluid, the chance of proving any one girl was in any one car is very small. It's notoriously difficult to get convictions for historic rapes, so the team try a different approach. Trafficking legislation emphasises the control that traffickers have over their victims, and so makes it harder for defence barristers to imply the sex was consensual. The police have called in Mike Hands, a child trafficking expert, for advice.
A lot of the controls come from the methods they use. So they will identify a child. That child will have a vulnerability. As they build up the grooming phase, it'll be then breaking them away from their support mechanisms. So it'll be breaking away from their siblings and parents, breaking away from their peer groups, so that they've got no support structure around them other than the trafficker. And that's when the cycle of abuse cranks up, and that child is completely alone. And people say, why do the children keep going back? Well, why wouldn't they? Where else have they got to go now? They haven't got anywhere to go. All their support, everything comes from these control us from these traffickers.
The use of trafficking law in gang grooming cases was pioneered by Sheila Taylor, whose work with child victims prompted a similar investigation in Derby. She spotted how girls were being moved all over the UK, completely controlled by their traffickers.
What we had was Derby in the middle, and then we had understanding that these young people had gone to all of these different places, as far as Devon, Middlesbrough, Birmingham, all sorts of strange places, and that highlighted how much movement there was. 24 towns and cities were named in 81 cases.
So these children were being trafficked across the country?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And that's significant because in cases where girls are reluctant to give evidence or they are finding it difficult, there's this really important piece of legislation that can be used to bring these men to justice.
Yes, because all of that legislation being linked to traffic talks about young people being out of control and being controlled, and therefore it makes it applicable. But the biggest thing about the trafficking offences, it does say that consent is irrelevant.
A child can't consent. In law, it can't consent to be exploited. So if that child's under 16, consent is not an issue. Now, in the case of the Chalice children, they're being moved around the force area and outside of the force area in some cases, and the intention for that, at the end of that movement or during that movement, was that they would be sexually exploited. If you can show that, then you can convict for human trafficking. You don't need forensic, you don't need DNA, you don't need disclosures from children. It's a very simple piece of legislation. Once you understand it, it's very simple.
David clearly remembers how the traffickers took complete control of his daughter Abby over a period of 18 months.
She would do anything for them. And later on, speaking to her, asking her what kind of control did they have over you? Was it physical? Did they threaten you with violence to beat you up? And she said, no, they were cleverer than that. It wasn't the threats that were directly made at her. It was the threats made to her about what would happen to me and my wife. That was the main reason she carried on doing what she was doing, because she was frightened of the threats made against us. It's all coming back.
David had to pick up his daughter from towns all over the country, including Brighouse, Halifax, Bradford and Birmingham. Sarah was also taken to other towns. She was in the control of her abusers for 4 years, and she's worked out she was passed around 72 men.
This here, where it all started, was when I was really raped, when I was really scared. And then this here is like the aftermath. The result, I think I just felt totally intimidated, and I think fear goes beyond physical, right? It goes beyond that, and it's a mental thing.
And do you think that psychological manipulation was just as powerful as the sexual exploitation?
Yeah.
But it wasn't consent?
No, it wasn't, because if I had a choice, then I wouldn't have done it.
What do you think it was if it wasn't consent?
It was intimidation, and it was control, and it was rape.
Once the Chalice children are officially classed under the European Convention as victims of trafficking, it's seen as technically impossible for them to have consented to sex. It's a significant breakthrough for the team.
We're trying to use the trafficking legislation to link together a number of victim accounts of where men are moving these victims around the country. It's the glue that brings it together, rather than trying to go to court with separate rape, separate abduction, underage sex allegations, so that you've got one victim facing one suspect. So what we're now trying to do with ours is to say, okay, we've got 5 or 6 victims here, give me a consistency. There's a consistency in the type of car, the location they've gone to for the sex. All these things are consistencies I can bring together so that I can get the victims themselves to corroborate each other.
With the focus on trafficking, the police are using a combination of phone data and automatic number plate recognition cameras, ANPRs, to establish the suspect's movements.
What we're trying to show is that he's travelled from one particular place to another.
His phone hits that cell site at this time, and 15 minutes later the car goes through the ANPR, and that works out about right on the timings.
Telephones has been massive on this job. There's been about 200 plus phones seized, and large numbers. I mean, 141 calls, and even if it's only one call, it's still a link between those two. They've still got to explain it. Why have you made a call to somebody you're saying you don't know?
The police have pieced together enough evidence for the next phase of arrests.
Let's go for him.
In the autumn of 2010, the police organised the simultaneous arrest of 4 men. A new victim has come forward who says that she was moved to Telford and then sexually assaulted over several days. One of the key suspects, Eddie, is arrested from his bail address in Huddersfield in connection with this new case.
Okay, let's do it. Hello? Miss Mercia, please. We've got a warrant for your arrest. Can you step inside for us, please?
We're on the search of premises while we're here, okay? So if you just remain with us just for the time being.
This is bullshit, mate. You know what I mean?
Hey.
You'll have your chance to explain the bullshit at the police station. Are you a religious man?
Hey?
Religious man? Do you want to take anything with you?
All right.
No? Anything? Okay.
Listen, anything you touch from here, I know exactly what's here, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want my phones back as well.
You'll get back eventually.
Everything. No, I want back. As soon as I get let go, I want all my shit back.
Sit this side for us, yeah?
As the analysis on the phones comes back for earlier cases, the police believe they'll be able to prove that texts from Eddie's brother Max show he intended to traffic girls for sex.
When we looked at text messaging, you could see Max would be speaking to third parties in order to facilitate, to pick up, to drop off, make arrangements. For example, pick her up at 11 from the hospital bus stop, and Eddie replies to Max, tell her if she's not there, she's getting knocked out. Minutes later, pick her up from the hospital bus stop, she's waiting. So they've organised for her to be picked up and transported somewhere. And the language as well was particularly unpleasant, where Ardal Ali texts one of the victims, what you doing, you sly bitch. He then follows up, just getting up, you smelly burnt out bitch. It's not unusual to experience language where they will say, fuck you, you're sly, you're a bitch. And particularly when they didn't seem to be getting what they wanted. And they will refer to girls as whores. At 9:15, he texts, sort something out for tonight. I got a whore sorted. He replies again, I got 2 girls, ring me. And then it ends with, I got a girl sorted, need a place, bruv, ?
Eddie has been arrested on suspicion of rape. The police have connected him to the victim through his phone records. But critically, this time they also have a DNA sample linking him to the girl.
He has already said he's never done anything with girls, but we'll ask a specific question.
Yeah.
Have you ever had any sexual activity with any females in that vehicle,
Well, I think,
including your wife?
We've never had probably this kind of strong evidence previously,
No.
and he's expecting the same, that we haven't got anything else, whereas we'd have.
The significance of the sample that's been recorded from the vehicle, it's a mixed profile, and it's a mixture of his DNA and her DNA.
From another room in the station, senior officers watched the interview by video link.
Have you ever had any sexual relations with anybody in that car during the time you had it?
I got a girl to wank me off.
Is that the only time you've ejaculated in that car?
Yeah, that's it.
So if I just show you that, that's a photograph of a girl.
No, I don't know her. Never seen that girl.
You want me to tell you how she describes the driver? She describes that male as being an Asian male, skinny build, with glasses, in his 20s, with goofy teeth.
Yeah, how many skinny Asians are there?
She's describing you, isn't she? She's describing you because you're the person who drove her outside of Telford and raped her, aren't you?
No, that's what you're saying. Yeah?
I'm asking
What do you
you.
mean? If anything did happen, yeah, in the car, there would have been something there, you know what I mean? For your DNA, forensics, you know what I mean? There would have been something there for you. I didn't do nothing. I don't even know that girl.
Can you explain why the person who is alleging rape against you, who you say you don't know, who you've never met before, why her telephone number is on 2 of your mobile phones?
Somebody must have just used my phone. That's the only thing.
That's a bizarre explanation.
If somebody got raped, yeah, they would have told the police straight away.
What was that text about? Simple question.
Listen, I have millions of texts to me. You think I'm gonna remember some poxy little low-class evidence shit you got there?
Okay.
I don't think so.
You can just say
Yeah.
you can't remember.
No,
you don't
it's
need
just
to
you
say that.
do my head in.
You said to us earlier, well, if I'd have had sex with her, you'd have found DNA or forensics or something in the car. You were right, there is DNA.
So what?
Forensic
So
in
what?
the car,
I didn't
linking
rape her.
you
I didn't
and
rape
her.
her.
Oh, right, so what did you do
I didn't
with
rape her.
What
Huh?
did you do with her then?
I didn't rape her.
What did you do with her?
I had sex with her.
So
But
you had sex with her.
listen to
Tell
this.
me about this then.
Listen to this, yeah?
The tape is now about to finish and you have just changed your story completely, so we're going to stop this interview. The time is 9 minutes to 9.
We've got some good results with the interviews. We had the revelations with that gentleman changing his story right at the very end. Obviously there's kind of pros for that. We just need to try and firm up on that now and try and prove that obviously his lies were due to his guilt, or obviously prove that he's an innocent man.
It seemed like the police had made a breakthrough. Yet over the next few weeks, the Crown Prosecution Service decides not to proceed with the case. They feel that the victim won't stand up to cross-examination in court and could be painted as an unreliable witness. This case against Eddie was dropped, but as the evidence builds up against him, he faces 20 charges, including rape, inciting child prostitution, and sexual activity with a child. Despite the many setbacks in the investigation, over the next 5 months, the team prepare the central Chalice case for court and settle on which victims are prepared to give evidence.
We've got to get the first one through the court. If we get that through the court, if the girls are allowed to tell the court what's happened and the jury can actually believe them, if we get that first case through and then those men are dealt with, we can then move on from there.
We're now 4 days from trial, and in relation to the court case itself, this is all the paperwork, some 30 or 40 boxes. As a team now, we're just anxious to get underway. This has been a long route, and for a lot of people now, there's a lot of nervous tension. Us as professionals, I wouldn't say used to it, but we're eagerly now just to wait and get underway.
A year and a half after the first arrests, the main case begins. 9 men are on trial, 7 are married, 1 is a grandfather. They face 49 charges ranging from trafficking, rape, sexual activity with a child, and inciting child prostitution. 7 girls have agreed to give testimony. They'll be questioned by a total of 21 barristers. The police have worked hard to keep the victims who are going to testify on board.
You just have to keep visiting her and getting her and see whether there are issues of security.
It's been a long and difficult process.
This hanging over their head for all of that time can't be easy for them. They're putting their lives on hold and worrying every day about, their addresses being discovered or them being followed to and from wherever they're going. And you do feel very overprotective of these girls because you know what they've been through. I go home worrying about them terribly. But it is going to be hard keeping them on board. And as we know that the victim isn't always thought about in the criminal justice system. Some of them have had to be moved house, because people have found out where they've lived. Other people have got cameras in their houses, panic alarms. So they're just thinking, what if, what if, what if?
The first victim takes the stand. She's there for over 3 weeks, cross-examined by 7 defence barristers. Her police interviews are shown in court.
Why did people give you drink?
I don't know, to get drunk.
And then what?
To have sex.
Do you think that was a reason why they gave you drink?
Yeah.
Was there ever a time that you had sex without drink or drugs? No. When you would have been sober? Was it always the same?
Yeah.
The jury are also shown police videos in which the victims are driven around the town of Wellington, identifying key locations of abuse.
Max used to sell me to the Bengali people in there.
What's that place called?
Darker.
The Darker. That's where you've just said Max used to sell you to the Bengalis.
Max, we could show from telephone records, was in communication with a worker at that restaurant, and that he was making arrangements over the telephone suggesting that he had girls that he could take to that restaurant. They would be driven around to the rear of the premises. They were not allowed to go through the front of the premises. They would go up on the outside, up to the top of the building, out the back wall, and they would go through a window.
Tell me what would happen there.
You need to have sex with them.
With who?
The 3 people that were there.
Are they workers at the restaurant?
Yeah.
And again, what would they do to you?
Have sex.
Their penis and sexual vagina, one after the other?
Yeah.
Did you ever say no?
Yeah.
Oh, tell me about that time you said no.
It just sort of makes me feel guilty.
How does he do that?
Don't know, he just keeps on about saying, go on then, like, please and stuff.
And did you ever stand your ground and refuse to do it? No.
After nearly 4 months in court, only 4 of the 7 victims have so far been heard, but the prosecution case has reached a crisis point. 7 defence lawyers assassinate the character of the victims, implying that they were willing, even though all of them were under the legal age of sexual consent at the time. The girls have told us what they found particularly galling about going to court was being cross-examined by multiple barristers. For instance, being told repeatedly that they were lying. The transcripts from the court showed the barrister asks, "I want to ask you once more why you are telling lies." He goes on to say, "I suggest to you you're telling lies in this court before this jury." "No," says the witness, "I'm not telling lies." She's obviously broken down, and he's continuing, "You are a compulsive liar." She's shouting and crying, "Was you there? Was you there? You've told about my client Adil Ali that he took you to this restaurant." "Yeah, he did take us to this restaurant." "You're telling lies." She's shouting, "No, I'm not. Shut up." She's clearly very distressed, but he continues.
I don't want to victimise these girls, but in our present system, every one of the barristers for the men in the court, right, every one of those barristers has the opportunity to cross-examine that particular girl. If I've got 7 or 8 men in court, should we allow every barrister to have one go after another, or couldn't they at least agree on what questions they want to ask, remembering that we've got to prove our case beyond reasonable doubt. The defence only have to provide a doubt.
In September 2011, after 70 days in court and nearly 2 years of police work costing several £million, the trial collapses because doubt is irrevocably cast on the testimony of one of the key victims. The judge may allow a retrial in the future, but for now, Telford police must watch the accused walk free, a group of men the police believe have controlled, raped and trafficked children. For the victims involved in the Chalice case, the ordeal of going to court was overwhelming. How difficult was it for you to be cross-examined?
It was horrible. They tried to make out that it was my fault, and he had lied about what I was like and the things I did. It was like it was happening again because they were just making stuff up about me, and it was exactly like the things they used to say about me at the time.
And you had to relive your ordeal?
I did.
It's very difficult for young people to go through this process. How would you feel if it was yourself who had been raped by a multiple of men And when you get into court, you're then cross-examined by a barrister for each of those offenders, by people in authority who are quite aggressive and who are in control of the situation. That's exactly the situation these young people have been in when they've been exploited. And we need a review of our judicial system about how these young people are represented in court and how they're protected so they're not re-victimised and traumatised and violated by the system of prosecution.
It was every day for weeks. She was escorted by the police, taken into the courts, which must have been really hard for her because she was interviewed by all of the barristers of all the defendants. She couldn't talk about the trial. It was like she was just sort of went into herself. She knew what was coming the next day. It was heartbreaking to watch her come home and have no expression, no nothing. Her whole life's just been washed away. I mean, they've broke my daughter and they've broken my family.
The collapse of grooming trials like this and the suicide of a victim after she was branded a liar and a fantasist by the barrister defending the man who sexually abused her has led to the Director of Public Prosecutions to call for urgent radical reform. He says that above all, victims need to feel that they will be believed when they come forward. But it's not just about being believed. Once the victims have given statements to the police, they have to return to exactly the same situation that they left, often falling back under the control of their abusers. In other countries, there are centres where the victims can go for their own protection immediately after giving a statement.
If you look at somewhere like Holland, since 2005, they've identified internal trafficking of their own children, and they have specialist centres that the children can be referred to recover and have their trauma treated by psychologists, nurses, doctors. We don't have any of that in this country. There is one specialist residential childcare home. It's a small home, it only has 4 beds.
Why don't we have more?
I don't think it's the crime is understood, and I don't think that the trauma and the controls that are exerted on the children are understood.
The Office of the Children's Commissioner estimates at least 10,000 children may be victims of this kind of sexual exploitation. Yet there are only 4 beds in the whole of the UK to help children recover from this horrific abuse. While the judge of the main Chalice case considers whether to allow a retrial, Telford Police act on the lessons learnt in this case by trying to stop girls going through this kind of abuse and the subsequent ordeal of a police investigation and trial.
You got your driving licence, mate?
We are going through a big training and development process with all of our staff, because I think an awful lot of this comes from that frontline policing. When we stop a car and it's got a young girl, we don't take it as face value. The officers will dig what is happening in this young girl's life to make her continually go missing. We've become far more astute, I think, for us to start alarm bells ringing earlier.
They're hoping to protect vulnerable girls at a much earlier stage so that they don't repeatedly go missing.
We've had an incident where we have a young child that's walked out from care this evening. As a result of that, we're treating the missing child as a high-risk missing person.
The police are now targeting potential perpetrators and issuing child abduction notices.
Come here, sit. Are you aware of how old is?
Yeah. We've heard that she's 15.
She's 12.
She's 12. How old?
12.
Oh, I told you she was 15.
She's 12.
Oh. We did not know this.
Right. Obviously, because of the age, we'll serve what we call a child abduction notice on your son, which will basically mean is to have no further contact with her.
In October 2011, the judge decides the main Chalice case is too complex to bring back to a jury as a single trial. Instead, 6 separate trials are scheduled. The victims, some of whom have already been repeatedly reduced to tears under cross-examination by 7 barristers, have to find the courage to face it all again.
I had to cut myself off from my fear and just think, I have to do this, I want to do it. I believe he's hurt other girls and I don't want him to hurt other girls anymore.
In the summer of 2012, Telford police finally have the result they've been working so hard to secure. Their main facilitators, the two Ali brothers, are found guilty. Max is convicted of human trafficking and controlling child prostitution. Eddie is convicted of multiple sexual offences, including the rape of a 13-year-old. They're sentenced in October 2012, almost 3 years after their initial arrest. I've just come out of court and Adil Ali has been given 18 years imprisonment. Mubarak Ali has been given 14 years imprisonment. The judge described them both as cold-hearted and cynical.
This really is the culmination of an extensive investigation. That investigation has taken some 3 years to complete. I would just really like to take this opportunity to thank the victims for the courage that they've shown to attend court. Also, I hope that this will go some way for them to move on in their lives.
What does today mean to you?
At times I've been close to tears. It's been a very difficult journey. There is a massive sense of relief when the judge talks about the fact that the men had lied, not the girls. I thought that sent a great message back to the victims that have put up with so much. What I wanted them to see was that we will go out there and we will investigate a rape. We fight for every one of these cases.
By December 2012, the new cases have come to court, and including Max and Eddie, the Chalice investigation results in 8 men being sentenced in total to 59.5 years. The list of suspected perpetrators has risen to over 200, and of the 106 victims positively identified by police, only 5 have so far seen justice served on their abusers, though Telford police are still making arrests. Campaigners say child victims of sexual abuse should be cross-examined in judges' chambers to be spared the agony of re-victimization in open court. Without a significant review of the way these cases are tried, young people will continue to be traumatized, not only by their abusers, but also by the judicial system itself.
I want it to stop, and I want people to stop blaming the girls, because that's the easy thing to do. It's harder to accept what is really going on, and it's harder to do something about it. It's easy just to blame the girls and not do anything.
If you've been affected by the issues in this programme, support is available online at channel4.com/dispatches. Or next here on 4 999, What's Your Emergency?